Channel's Week in Review. The man most scorned by the Jewish world in the past couple years gets acquitted of improper labor practices. Discussing Israel advocacy in small groupings, the PR offensive on the flotilla raid that could backfire, and the controversial comments that ended the career of an esteemed journalist. It's the Jewish news that's changing your world on this episode of the Week in Review. Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. He was castigated in nearly every major Jewish forum outside his own community for the past several years. But the controversial owner of a kosher slaughterhouse that faced the largest immigration raid in American history has been acquitted on charges of engaging child labor. That means that Sholom Rubashkin, the Lubavitch Chassid who owned and operated the Agriprocessors plant in Postville, Iowa, stands convicted of none of the charges of improper labor practices, of which he was broadly accused in most Jewish settings, from newspapers to synagogues. After Rubashkin's acquittal on child labor charges this week, the jury foreman in the case spoke to several Iowa newspapers and explained why the jury voted for acquittal after 26 underage workers testified at Rubashkin's trial, saying, quote, "Each one of them indicated they didn't tell the truth when applying for a job at Agriprocessors and indicated they knew they had to be over the age of 18 to get a job, so they acquired documentation from somewhere." Rubashkin has been convicted of bank fraud, in which he was found guilty of overstating his company's financial position to the bank with which Agriprocessors had a credit line. But on the issue of mistreatment of workers, whether over allegations by certain activists in the community that Rubashkin didn't provide legal wages, exploited immigrant workers, or utilized child labor amid other claims, Rubashkin has now either been acquitted or had charges dropped on all fronts. This presents a strong contrast with the picture of Rubashkin as a symbol of moral corruption in an Orthodox-run kosher business that was presented by Jewish media and community leaders over the past few years. Calls for boycotts of Agriprocessors were loud and frequent, and Agriprocessors eventually declared bankruptcy and sold its Iowa operations. As part of the allegations of unethical dealings about Rubashkin, two groups launched so-called ethical seals of approval. One, the Tav HaYosher from Orthodox social justice organization Uri L'Tzedek, now certifies 30 restaurants and got much of its initial momentum by declaring a boycott of Agriprocessors. The second, a soon-to-be-released certification born out of the Rabbinical Assembly of the conservative movement, is being led by Rabbi Morris Allen, an early critic of Agriprocessors. Interestingly, while both of these ethical seals of approval came from the idea of ensuring ethical conduct in concert with Jewish teachings, in their actual implementation, both groups have told TJC that they are simply going to verify that the businesses receiving the seals are in compliance with labor laws, something of which Rubashkin, whom these groups railed against in getting their organizations rolling, has now repeatedly avoided conviction. And now, on the one crime on which Rubashkin has been convicted, bank fraud for overstating Agriprocessors' financial position to the company's bank, federal prosecutors are seeking a sentence of 25 years in prison, which a coalition of former attorneys general has protested as unjust. In the current episode of the Jewish Channel's With the Editors, currently airing on TJC Original Series, here's what Jewish newspaper editors had to say.
It's really been a remarkable shift in some parts of the community. When this first happened, we wrote about it in the Jewish Star. We editorialized that the guy broke the law apparently, or he was accused of breaking the law at that point, and he's got to take his lumps. And there's no question about it. I mean, I still feel that way personally. On the other hand, though, you take corporate criminals who get a year and a day, or they go into federal prison in the morning and they're out by lunch. They're in the halfway house by dinner. And they want to throw this guy, and they want to put him away for 25 years.
Well, that's the question. We don't really know why. Why are they seeking such a harsh penalty? And it's hard not to make the comparison with Jonathan Pollard, who was, put away for a life sentence for, again, committing a crime, but it seemed that the punishment didn't quite fit it. So it's hard to know, what it is.
We know Casper Weinberger has nothing to do with it.
Right, exactly right. Is it, again, anti-Semitism? Is it because of a religious figure? Or, it'll be interesting to see whether it really happens.
You can see more of their opinions on Rubashkin and other issues on the full episode of With the Editors, currently airing on the Jewish Channel. But shifting from domestic issues to Israel, many have long been talking about ways to fix the Jewish state's problems with big ideas. But one group is trying to get things started with a little idea. Christian Needon reports.
Global perceptions of Israel have taken a turn for the worse in recent weeks, with the 9 deaths in the flotilla raid garnering much attention. This has put a damper on Israel's recent efforts to rebrand itself to the world, but those efforts are likely to resume once the raid moves off the front pages. One way Israel has been trying to rebrand itself is as a rising power in the technology sector, an effort not lost on advertising experts like Martin Case. At an event 2 weeks prior to the flotilla raid, Case addressed a gathering of young professionals at a Soho bar and, using corporate examples like Nike, explained how he would approach rebranding Israel.
I've been thinking for years, which is like way too long, for the last 2 years, of putting out a t-shirt that reads, Israel, I've only heard good things and bad things. Hasbara, foreign ministry, etc., only give us a platform to talk about good things. So how do we go through a process similar to Nike's process and be able to talk about good things and bad things? Is it possible to have a single platform that talks about Israel in a comprehensive, three-dimensional way that deals both with its reality and with its aspirations?
Case's 10-minute lecture was the centerpiece of the latest edition of The Little Idea, a rotating single-speaker event attended by a mostly younger crowd from different backgrounds. It was founded last summer by brothers Jonathan and Ari Melber with a relatively laid-back approach.
Come by if you want. It's 10 minutes, so you can get a quick intellectual fix on your way to dinner or some other event, or if you do have the whole evening, you're welcome to stay for a while. It's a lot of interesting people. It ranges from politics to social commentary to tech stuff and whoever else that we think is doing something interesting and has something interesting to say.
Although most Little Idea events don't focus on Israel or other Jewish topics, Case's lecture, titled Rebranding Israel Honestly, focused on the differences between the negative way in which the world views the Israel brand and the efforts of the country to shift perceptions using more positive t-shirt-ready phrases like
Israel, creative energy. The foreign ministry is coming out with this platform for Israel in its public communications. And I can't help but wonder exactly who is this supposed to convince? Exactly who is supposed to accept that Israel is about creative energy and that that's what characterizes the state as we know it, when, as I'm sure this crowd is pretty well aware, one of the first associations of the state of Israel is about the conflict.
To hear more ideas about rebranding Israel, please tune into the broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Christian. In related news, in trying to drum up support for Israel's actions in the raid on the ship Mavi Marmara last week that left at least 9 activists dead and also led to significant injuries for 2 Israeli soldiers, some in the Jewish community have been pushing efforts that could backfire. In one email making the rounds in the Jewish community, novelist Naomi Reagan claimed that heavy weapons were found in the cargo of the Mavi Marmara, and linked to this video in which heavy weapons are indeed being removed from shipping containers. But the video was uploaded 8 months ago, on November 4th, 2009, and was seized from an Iranian ship heading to Lebanon to aid Hezbollah, not Hamas. That's all for this week. For more news and analysis from the Jewish Channel during the week, please check out our blog at newsdesk.tjctv.com. From all of us here at the Jewish Channel, be well. The Jewish Channel is available on cable. IO Optimum Cable Channel 291, Time Warner Cable Channel 528, RCN Channel 268, Verizon Fios Channel 900, and Cox Cable Channel 1. For more information, visit tjctv.com.